There are tournaments people remember for their greatness. Others stay in memory for a very different reason, because of the debates they create, the emotions they leave unfinished, and a strange feeling that something, somewhere, was never quite complete. The 2010 World Cup in South Africa belongs to the second kind. In a conversation with The Overlap, Wayne Rooney did not hesitate to call it the worst World Cup in history, not because he wanted attention, but because to him, it never truly felt like a World Cup at all. You won't find a worse World Cup than South Africa 2010. It just didn't feel like a World Cup. At first, it sounds harsh, maybe even unfair. But when you look closer, when you step into the atmosphere of that summer, you begin to understand that Rooney was not just talking about football, he was talking about feeling. And in 2010, that feeling was different. The World Cup that year carried enormous meaning. For the first time, Africa hosted football's greatest event. It was a moment of pride, not just for South Africa, but for an entire continent that had long waited to stand at the center of the global game. The opening ceremony reflected that pride. It was colorful, vibrant, alive with music and movement. It was not just a celebration of football, it was a celebration of identity, of history, of belonging. For a moment, everything felt perfect. But then, reality began to settle in. Rooney later recalled the journey to the opening match. It was supposed to be a moment filled with anticipation. The kind of journey where you see fans lining the streets, waving flags, singing songs, turning entire cities into festivals. Instead, there was silence, dark roads, empty spaces. It felt controlled, contained, almost distant. Part of it came from security concerns. South Africa, at the time, faced real challenges, and measures were taken to ensure safety. But those measures came at a cost. The spontaneous, chaotic joy that usually surrounds a World Cup was reduced. Fans stayed in safe zones, streets were quieter, movement was restricted. For the first time, the World Cup felt like it was happening inside the stadiums and nowhere else. And that mattered more than people realized. Because the World Cup is never just about what happens on the pitch. It is about everything around it. Then came the sound, or rather, the one sound that replaced all others. The vuvuzela. At first, it was fascinating, unique, something new, a cultural symbol of South Africa that gave the tournament its own identity. But as the matches went on, that fascination turned into something else. The sound never stopped. It didn't rise or fall. It didn't react. It didn't explode. It just existed. A constant droning noise that filled every second of every game. For South Africans, it was pride. For many players, commentators, and fans around the world, it became overwhelming. The natural rhythm of football, the rise of tension, the explosion of celebration, the silence before a crucial moment, was flattened into one continuous hum. A goal no longer felt like a moment that broke the noise. It felt like something happening inside it, and slowly, something essential was lost. On the pitch, the tournament followed a similar pattern: cautious, tight, controlled. Teams approached games with discipline and fear of making mistakes. Defensive structures were prioritized. Creativity often took a step back. Matches were decided by small moments rather than bold expression. There were fewer goals, fewer risks, fewer moments that made you jump out of your seat in disbelief. It was football played with calculation rather than instinct. Even the eventual champions, Spain, reflected this shift. Their style was built on control, possession, patience, precision. They dominated games not by overwhelming opponents with chaos, but by slowly suffocating them with order. They were brilliant, they were historic, but they were not wild. They did not create the kind of emotional explosions that World Cups are remembered for. And then there was Rooney himself. He arrived in South Africa as England's main hope. After an incredible season at club level, he was expected to lead his country, to be the difference. But instead, he became a symbol of everything that went wrong. England teams struggled. Under Fabio Capello, they looked disjointed, uncertain, and disconnected. There was no rhythm, no identity, no spark. And Rooney, he couldn't score. Game after game passed, and the pressure grew heavier. Then came the moment that defined his tournament. After a frustrating 0-0 draw with Algeria, Rooney reacted to the boos from England fans. His sarcastic comment, caught on camera, revealed something deeper than frustration. It revealed a broken connection between players and supporters, between expectation and reality. The World Cup is supposed to bring people together, but for England in 2010, it did the opposite. And yet, despite all of this, the tournament was not empty. Because sometimes, when the football lacks magic, the world around it finds a way to create its own. There was music. Two songs in particular became the heartbeat of that summer. Waka Waka, This Time for Africa, by Shakira, and Wave and Flag by Kanan. They were everywhere, on television, in streets, in homes. They carried something the football sometimes lacked: energy, joy, and connection. Samina Mina echoed across continents, Give Me Freedom, Give Me Fire, became an anthem. You may not remember every match from that tournament, but you remember those songs because they made you feel something. And then there was one of the strangest stories in World Cup history: Paul the octopus. In a small aquarium in Germany, a simple octopus somehow became a global sensation. Before each match involving Germany, Paul would predict the result by choosing between two boxes. At first, it was entertainment. Then it became something more, because Paul kept getting it right, again and again. Match after match, his predictions came true. The world began to watch, then to believe. And when he predicted that Spain would win the final, people paid attention. When it happened, Paul became something unforgettable, a symbol of the absurd beauty of football, a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected stories become the biggest ones. There were still moments of brilliance on the pitch. Uruguay's journey, led by Diego Forlán, brought excitement to the tournament. His long-range goals, his leadership, his ability to rise in key moments made him one of the standout players. And then there was Ghana. Carrying the hopes of an entire continent, they came within seconds of making history. Until that moment. Luis Suarez blocked a goal with his hand on the line. Red card, penalty, a chance to reach the semi-finals, and Asamoah Gyan missed. It was heartbreak, pure devastating heartbreak. But it was also football at its most human. Finally, the final. A tense, physical battle between two teams that refused to break. And then, in extra time, Andres Iniesta scored. It wasn't spectacular, but it was enough. Spain became champions for the first time. The 2010 World Cup was not a perfect story. It lacked the chaos, the magic, the explosion of emotion that defines the greatest tournaments. But maybe that is exactly why it still matters, because not every memory needs to be perfect. Some stay with us because they are different, because they challenge expectations, because they leave us with questions instead of answers. It was a different kind of story, less about spectacle, more about identity, about presence, about being seen. It gave the world songs that still live on. It gave us stories that felt almost surreal. It gave us moments of heartbreak and quiet brilliance. So maybe the truth lies somewhere in between. World Cup 2010 was not the worst. It was simply incomplete. A tournament that didn't fully come together, but still left behind something real. And sometimes, those are the stories that stay with us the longest. Because sometimes, what makes something feel wrong is not what happens, it is what is missing. And in 2010, something was missing. The feeling. And yet, despite everything, that World Cup endures. Not as a masterpiece, but as a mystery. A tournament that never fully came together, but never faded away either. And maybe, in its own strange way, that is what makes it unforgettable.